Hello, Kimberly and Matt again, here talking about revenue management. Ultimately, revenue management is an important topic in any business, and in a services business, it's extremely important. Kimberly, what are some of the things that are different for revenue management in a services company?
So in a product company, you have what you call depleting inventory. So if I have 100 widgets and I sell 10 widgets, I now have 90 widgets available. However, if I don't sell any widgets in a week and then I sell all my widgets the next week, there's no impact to my revenue and there's no impact to my cost of goods sold, or not a big one, right? So that means like that's a depleting inventory. With professional services company, if I have 100 consultants and 10 of those consultants are not on a project for a week, I can never go back and reclaim the revenue that I would have gotten from those 10 consultants being on projects for that week. And I hate calling people inventory, but it essentially is your inventory in a services company. Is your time, is your people's time is your inventory, and you can't reclaim that time. You can't time travel back and reclaim that week. So being able to look forward and course correct and see everything really tight. Your cadence has to be super tight when you're in a services organization, because you can't, your inventory expires and you can't have you can't go back and reclaim the revenue on it.
So, revenue management implies that we can actually manage our revenue. So, um, is it true that we can actually go and, if we just had done better management, we would have more revenue? You know, you know, Kimberly, if I, in our previous company, I come to you and said, well, I just need more sales next month. Like, why don't you actually try to sell now, right? You'd be, somewhat offended, saying, well, I'm already trying to sell, right? It's not like you're not already trying. So, um, does is revenue management really something you can manage?
Yes and no. It's a weird term. We never really, like you said, you never walked up and said, "Hey, let's have a revenue management meeting." We had meetings, we had a cadence, and we talk about how we run the company. And so revenue really is an outcome of how you're running the company, right? So like you said, I'm already working on sales. I'm already working on keeping my people happy. I'm looking at growing our client base and making sure that we have enough in our pipeline so that we can optimize that and we can work on the right things. And by doing that, by making sure that I'm keeping a really tight eye on people and their utilization, that I always have a healthy sales pipeline, those things come together to make the business generate revenue, which allows me to manage our revenue, right? So managing revenue is looking at, how do I keep my revenue consistent or consistently growing? How do I know what's going to be coming in and I'm not surprised on a week or a monthly basis? And so all of those pieces that come together to run the business successfully are the things that generate the outcome of the revenue.
Yeah, and one of the things I always have talked about is we can't control what happens on the client side of a deal or of a project that we're working on winning, but we can control what happens on our side. So did we see the cliff soon enough? Did we get the opportunity in front of the client soon enough? How much time are we spending when the ball's on our side of the court? So while we can't manage everything, we can make sure that we have a really healthy cadence and company that's doing the right things, and that's going to give us more control over what's happening in the future for us. So let's talk about the KPIs and the metrics that you can use in doing revenue management. The first two, which are essential, are having a projection and understanding your variance. So first of all, let's talk about what is a projection. So when I'm projecting things like my revenue and expenses, I want to know what's going to happen in the next, month, 2 months, 3 months, so I can see what's happening project by project, person by person, and understand what my overall financial health is going to be based on what our best understanding of the future is. The variance is telling us over time how that's changing or how it's differing. So a variance in the past would be maybe I thought someone was going to bill 50 hours against a project and they only billed 30. Um, and that would produce a variance. But variance in the future is around my expectation. We thought we were going to win a project, now we're less confident. We thought we were going to hire 3 people, now we think we're going to hire 10, right? So the variance is going to show the difference from time to time over what our projection is. And ultimately the trend, that variance is going to show the trend of are things trending better, are things trending worse, or what have you. So when you're trying to manage your revenue and you're working within this cadence we talked about, it's essential that you have this data and information so that you can know here's what the current state of affairs are and here's how they're trending. Kimberly, what are some of the other things that give you a more detailed perspective that you could use as a KPI or as a metric?
Yeah, obviously revenue we look at, right? Talking about revenue management, but we look at our utilization of people. So what is our target utilization? Like, do we want people to be 80% utilized or 100% utilized? Well, 100% is a little much, but 90% utilized. And then are we trending towards actually having the utilization level we're expecting? Do we have the amount of percent of bench that we're expecting? Are we too high? Are we too low? If, we're too high on bench, then that means that we're not going to be hitting our targets. We're not trending the way that we need to, and we need to do more sales. If we're trending too low, it means that we don't have enough bench to start a new project. So we need to actually hire and train people ahead of that, so that we have the ability to staff projects when we're ready to staff projects. Some of the other little things that you're looking at are there's some side effects of things like people health, which sounds strange connected to revenue, but it really is. Your people health is very important. If you have a very low people health score, what's going to happen is you start having attrition. If you have high attrition, it impacts your variance. It causes a variance and variability, which impacts your revenue. So there's a lot of little things and pieces that go into play that come together that allow you to actually have a solid visibility into what's going on and actually faith in what you're looking at.
Yeah, I think it's very natural for us because we've been running services businesses most of our careers. But like knowing your business and the different aspects of how does sales impact revenue and your bench, or how does your hiring impact these things, or how does your utilization impact things? Knowing those things is extremely important so that as this information is coming in, you know which levers need to be pulled in order to help manage and drive your revenue. So Kimberly, let's talk about some revenue management tips and tricks, right? We talked earlier about the fact that it's extremely important to strengthen your cadence when things are good, so that you have it there when tough times. You may need to do it more often, but you don't have to go reinvent cadence, right? What are other things that can make revenue management more effective that you would focus on?
I think strengthening that cadence by having the right systems in place, both from a people standpoint, like having the right organizational structure in place, but also having the right systems in place to be able to actually like monitor your data and give you the information that you need. Like we talked about before, looking at your variance and being able to see projections. So you actually need to have in place the right systems to collect, and house that and give you that information in a timely, real-time manner. Otherwise, you're not going to have the view that you need in order to be able to move forward.
So another tip I would have is that transparency is extremely important. We talked about having expiring inventory. We talked about things constantly changing. I think it's extremely important then to make sure that information flows as quickly as possible. Having that transparency so that everybody knows what's happening at accounts, not because it's their job to deal with it, but so that they understand the set of decisions that need to be made, is extremely important. We don't have time to play games to try to, suss out information or try to manage that flow of information. Because if it takes a month for the right people to get the information that there's a problem at an account, we just lost a month in being able to deal with it, solve the problems, and so forth. So I think, you know, creating safety to have a highly transparent, um, you know, cadences and data, I think is extremely important when you're looking at revenue management. Kimberly, like creating that safety, right, for transparency requires trust and teamwork. Talk about that and how we have to build that into the revenue management process so that we ultimately achieve the goals.
So your trust and teamwork is essential, and it goes both ways. This isn't just about, the senior leadership. This is not just about if I have five account leaders coming together, me trusting that the account leaders are giving me the information that I need in a timely manner. But the account leaders have to trust me, they have to trust you, they have to trust the senior leadership team to know that they can bring information forward and bring the correct information forward and it not be an issue, right? So for example, if someone realizes there's an issue at their account and something's not gonna, they're gonna lose $5 million over the next year because of what's going on in the customer's business. If they don't feel safe and comfortable, they're gonna delay telling you. They're gonna try to fix it. They're gonna hide it. They're going to be afraid to come tell you. And that's like you said, that means that we don't have time to react. We can't help. So they have to feel like they can come to you the minute they know there's an issue and say, hey, look, here's the issue. Here's what I'm doing about it. And then what can you do to help me? Which then makes me trust them, right? So the trust has to go in both ways and it has to be safe. If they come to you with a $10 million issue and you say it's your issue or you fire them or there's some negative outcome for that, then the next person's not going to come to you with those issues and you're going to lose sight of what's actually going on in your business.
Yeah, it's interesting. This trust and teamwork and transparency is all connected, right? If if you want autonomy, and I'm your leader, the last thing you should be doing is reducing your transparency. And it might seem counterintuitive. If you're more transparent, then how am I going to trust you more and leave you alone more? But ultimately, knowing that you're looking at the right things, that you're worrying about the right things, are very comforting to a leader as you're trying to build trust and build autonomy. As a leader, you also have to, if you want people to be working autonomously and you don't want to be having to solve every problem, you need to produce that transparency to them so they know what's going on and they can make good decisions. So all of these things aren't to say that we don't want leaders to be accountable for their revenue, for their portion, but we need to have a cadence that gets information flowing quickly. And ultimately, in a services business, revenue is a team sport. Of course, someone has to sell the deal, but if we don't deliver the deal, the next deal is not going to be sold. If we don't source the people, if we don't, bill the client appropriately, if we don't do all of the things, we're not going to be growing that account. So in the end, that transparency and that smooth flow of information is essential to making sure that you're doing a good job at revenue management. When you're focused on revenue management and you're trying to choose a system that's going to help you with revenue management, ultimately you need to be looking for a few things. One is you need a system that's cross-disciplined. Since revenue management is made up of the results of your sales pipeline and your people pipeline and your financial forecast and your utilization, you need a system that can put all of that information together that's traceable so you can see when there's changes, what happened, what was the variance? Is it because we added expenses to the project or because we had to negotiate a lower rate? What happened that changed our forecast and changed our projection, right? You need to be scalable. So you may be starting out with a small team and growing the company over time. And you need a system that is easy enough to use that you can solve your problems today, but but powerful enough that it can grow to the systems you need in the future. And it needs to be traceable, because ultimately, um, knowing what happened when, is important. And the last thing is it needs to be sliceable, where I may own the data for the overall company, but I need other people to be able to own their practice of, in a specific technology, or someone to be able to own a market or a region. Kimberly, you used to own a slice of a business. How important is that sliceability to you?
The sliceability was huge, and we actually adapted the tool that we were using at the time so that we could slice it that way. If you're being held accountable as, the subset of the business I was held accountable for was like its own little mini business. So I had revenue targets, I had a bench to manage, I had, sales goals, we had margin targets. And so being able to see how all of that comes together for the piece that's mine, right, that I'm being held accountable for is huge. If I'm only able to look at the whole company and I'm seeing the bench for two other regions as well, then it's really hard for me to determine like where's my bench versus the company's bench, right? So if the company's running it, their bench isn't hitting the target, but mine is, and I can't see that, then I can't manage my business because I may think I have plenty of people on the bench and I don't. So being able to take that bigger piece of data and narrow it down so that you're actually looking at, that subset of the business you're looking at is like its own little business. That is hugely important to being able to be effective. It also empowers you then to step back and look at the larger business and work with the other folks who are responsible for those parts of the business to help each other out, and being able to see how each person's piece is functioning makes that a lot easier.
Yeah, so ultimately, when you're doing revenue management, it's essential to be future focused. I need to see, I can't manage revenue in the past, I have to manage revenue in the future. And it's constantly changing, so I have to be in a cadence that's regularly updating and constantly adjusting to the current reality. In the end, if you get the data flowing correctly within a good cadence, and you put the systems and tools around it to let you operate that, you'll have a very good opportunity to control your destiny and to manage your revenue and your future. Thanks for spending some time with Kimberly and I. If you have any questions or comments, definitely reach out, and we'd love to hear from you.
And give us a like.